In a very brief statement tonight, the Home Affairs Department says the Minister is now studying the two judgments and taking legal advice on them. He will, in due course, respond fully. For more on this, we're joined by the Asylum Seekers, Refugee and Migrant Coalition Executive Director, Muchengeti Hwacha. Very good evening to you, sir. Grateful for your time. So I wonder if you're able to give us a sense of the feeling among the people you work with on the back of today's court outcome.
People are quite elated by the judgment. They feel that their rights have been vindicated. And as myself and other representatives of civil society have been saying, the minister really failed to take due process in coming to his decision. He failed to give adequate consideration to the rights of the permit holders and failed to give them a fair opportunity to make representations. And
as things stand, this is but a temporary reprieve because the court has found that government erred on procedural grounds, but this process, as you're outlining now, can be restarted, and if the government can prove that it's followed due process, then the ZEP could still, at that point, be done away with.
You're very correct. The reprieve is only temporary, 12 months from the date of judgment. However, we think that upon reconsidering the merits of the decision, that the minister may come to a different conclusion. It is clear that the socio-economic circumstances that brought ZEP holders to South Africa in the first place are still dire in Zimbabwe. It is clear that many have built lives, careers, families in this country. Their children have known no other home. And when you take those things into consideration, we think that the minister will possibly reverse his decision to cancel the permit in the first place.
There is the argument among some that for Zimbabweans who are fed up with the poor state of affairs back home, economically, politically, etc., this year presents an opportunity to change that by participating in the election. Is that an option, a consideration for the hundreds of thousands of Zimbabweans who are in this country?
Look, it would be great, and we encourage every single Zimbabwean who is able to go home and participate in the election to do so. But you'll understand that it's obviously a big expense to travel back home, etc. However, it's also important to point out that the Zimbabwean government has barred the participation of people in the diaspora from the diaspora, requiring them to return to Zimbabwe and vote. Had the diaspora vote been available to them, it would, exactly like you're saying, be easy for the Zimbabweans in South Africa and in other countries to participate in this election.
And I wonder, Muchengeti, how the people you work with, the Zimbabweans you work with, are going to be using the next 12 months. You say many of them only know life in South Africa, or their children at least, because they've been here for well over a decade, etc. But given how long this has gone on for and the periods of uncertainty, are any of them, or a significant number, in fact, considering seeking greener pastures elsewhere, perhaps another country?
Definitely, I think everybody is sort of assessing their options. Those who are able to go and those who are able to return home, I think some of them will. Those who are able to travel to, like you say, greener pastures, some of them will. But for some, it's impossible for them to leave this country. They've built roots. They are paying mortgages. Their children are in the formative years of their schooling. So for those people, I think they're going to really have to come up with another plan. There has been some indication that the minister has made attempts to migrate them to other visas, but failing which the Asylum Seeker, Refugee and Migrant Coalition believes that there needs to be a broad consultation with all stakeholders and possibly give these permit holders a pathway to permanent residence.
And the challenge that many of the Zimbabweans will face who are in South Africa is that even if they've been here, let's say, 10, 15 years doing work, yes, you can talk about people who are in formal labor and perhaps working in hospitals, for example, in law firms, etc. But a great many Zimbabweans in this country are either working in the informal sector or in other industries where the government has already clearly said that the skills are not essential, or a skill set that this country does not possess, right? So if the process is rerun and we come to that point, would you agree that on those grounds, that category of Zimbabweans should be sent home?
I think the country is looking for, as you're saying, people with critical skills However, we've already integrated these 180,000 odd people into the economy, and I think that it would be a disservice or unfair to ask them to pack up their bags, even if they are working, as you say, in the informal sector. That being said, it's important to point out that migrants in South Africa particularly have been linked to greater economic outcomes, better job creation, employment creation, as well as business creation. So it's important to look at what the economists are saying, those who have studied the facts on the ground, and what the effect of migrants being in the country actually is.
They'll also say to you, in some cases, that those are positions that could be filled by South Africans who are themselves the victims of a rising unemployment rate here at home, and that they'd be best served in those positions, even though they sympathize with Zimbabweans. They should be prioritized as the natural citizens of this country.
I think that's a good point, and it's important to highlight that South African citizens are already prioritized in employment across the country. There's various statutes, for example, the BE Act, which incentivizes hiring historically disadvantaged South Africans. In the circumstances where you want to hire a migrant, there are certain certifications that you need from the Labor Department, which includes a certification that they have looked for a South African citizen to fill the role, and for whatever reason have been unable to find them, and only then can a foreign national fill that position. So there are already significant protections for South African citizens and their opportunities to employment in the country.
Looks great in theory, but you would agree, I'd imagine, that often in reality, in practice, the picture is different for many.
I think you're hitting the nail on the head that the buck really stops with people like the Department of Labor, who are tasked with enforcing these laws, with taking inspectors to various employment sites and ensuring that all of these procedures to protect South Africans have been adhered to. So it's very unfair for some to blame migrants for these issues when the buck really stops with the government, and it's their responsibility to enforce their own laws.
But in enforcing those rules, this government says that, in fact, it doesn't see a need for Zimbabwean labor in some of these sectors, or that being a reason, in fact, for a Zimbabwean national to stay here, because those skills are available around the corner and a South African could perform that task.
Yeah, as I'm saying, that when the government fails to enforce their own laws, the blame should be put on them. Where they are enforcing the law, I think Zimbabweans of all creed are very happy to adhere to what has been laid down and follow that procedure. But where the government is failing to enforce their own laws, I think that it becomes a difficult situation to put that burden on migrants to do so.
Last question then. If government does ultimately decide not to appeal or loses an appeal and has to rerun the process to do away with the Zimbabwe exemption permit, and we get to the point where submissions need to be heard, what submission would you make?
Thank you for that opportunity. South Africa has had exemption permits before, and we've dissolved those exemption permits before, specifically with regard to the Angolans. And there was a broad consultation in that instance, and the Angolans were given a pathway towards citizenship, taking into consideration the length of time they had been here, the roots they had put down here, the fact that their children knew no other home. So I think a similar submission is what us as the ASRM coalition intend to make to the minister, and give these people a pathway to permanent residence, those who'd like to remain.
Muchengeti Hwacha, Executive Director of the Asylum Seeker, Refugee and Migrant Coalition. Good to speak to you. Thank you.